Okay, now that we know some basic things about how to do mathematical operators and how to save variables, let's actually get some input from the user and then print something out for the user. So generally speaking, the print function can be used to display any text you pass as arguments. So if I would like to, I can say print welcome to Python. And if I execute that, it will simply say welcome to Python. I can also use double quotes here. So you can see these are single quotes. And now here I can use double quotes, and it in fact does the same thing. The print function can actually print many different objects, and you can actually separate these objects by commas. And it's important to remember that each comma adds a space character. So for example, if I want to save this X here as class exclamation point, then what I want to do is I want to print welcome, comma, to, comma, Python, comma, X. Each of these commas will add one space character after this string. So if I run this, it will say welcome to Python class here. And this is just a really simple way of actually adding multiple print statements together. If you have text actually, and you want to make it a new line, you can actually use what's called an escape character. An escape character, there are actually many of them, but the new line escape character is a very popular one. And this is basically \n. So if I scroll down here, you can see it's \n. Now, what I can do is as I type \n here, \n, every time I type this, it's going to add a new line. So you can see it says welcome, new line, to, new line, Python. Now, just because we see this in the text doesn't mean it actually gets printed out to the user. These escape characters are essentially invisible to the user. You only see it as the programmer. So I can also, for example, maybe add another line here. So now you can actually see a new line after the exclamation point. Interesting. There are other escape characters that are available as well. So \n is a new line character. \t is a horizontal tab. So for example, if you'd like to tab over, and maybe, for example, the 2 is going to be over slightly. You can see you can do that. We can also do a double / character. So this would actually say, what if I wanted to add a backslash at the end? You can do 2 backslashes and it adds 1 backslash. And the reason why is because Python interprets any backslash as basically something should be there. So if you have only 1 backslash, it gets confused. If I want to add a double quote or a single quote, I can, but typically I'll show you how to do this a little bit differently in just a minute. If you have a long amount of text and you actually want to make it appear in the editor in some way that's prettier, you can use what's called a continuation character, so inside the string. So once you actually have your text, you can then add another continuation character, which is a single backslash, and then there's something after that. And when you do that, it actually is just one long string, in fact, but it allows you to space it across multiple rows or lines in your editor. You can also print the result or value of an expression. So if I want to say, what's the sum of 7 plus 3? Well, it will just say the sum is 10. And remember, this comma adds a space. I could also say, well, what's 7 plus 3? And then save that as a variable called result. And then I can say, well, let's print that out. And it would give me the same thing. Now, when you're actually printing, typically what you'll see that most Python programmers will use single quotes. This is preferred by most programmers, at least Python programmers. And we generally are going to use single or double quotes for print statements. But in fact, you can use single or double quotes for pretty much any string. It doesn't just have to be for prints. So let's actually see how we can use this a little bit differently. What I'm doing here is I have the string in single quotes, but inside the string, I have double quotes. What if I try to use a single quotes here? You'll actually see that this is now black, and it will actually give me an error. Because when you're actually mixing the different quotation mark styles, whether it's a single or a double quote, it will give you a problem. So by doing this, it allows you to actually see what this double quote here. I could then say, well, I want to add a single quote because the name O'Brien has an apostrophe in it. So what I can do is I can use a \apostrophe, and that will then print the single quote right there. What happens if you have multiple types of quotes and you want to just mix and match them however you want? Well, what you can do is you can surround your string in triple double quotes, okay? You can actually use triple single quotes, but it's not recommended. It's generally recommended that you use triple double quotes. And then you can see here now that we have a double quote and we have a single quote, and it will work totally fine. So generally speaking, you want to surround your text in single quotes. But if you get into a situation where you actually have a lot of quotation marks in your text for some reason, you can just surround it by triple quotes, and that makes sure that you won't have any issues. The only problem you might have if you happen to have a triple double quote in your text, which I think that's pretty rare. You can also make a triple quoted string. And what this is where you can have, this is a triple quoted string that spans 2 lines. This is just extra text I can add. And then you can see that it actually adds a new line. So this allows you to make a new line without actually having that continuation character. I'm sorry, not continuation character, new line character. I can then, put this together and see it like that. And this is actually a lot of times the way you'll see people write long text in Python that they want to save for some reason. It'll be done in triple quotes like this. Okay, now let's get input from the user. Now that we know how to do all these printings and these other kinds of things, let's just get input from the user. Well, the way we do this is by using the input function. The input function, I can just ask a question, and I'll put a space here so that it looks a little bit prettier. After I execute that, it's just going to ask me, what's your name? So I can write, my name is Robert. And then now that actually saved the input that I gave it, Robert, here to this variable called name. Now when I do that, you can see that it says Robert. Now Robert here is in quotation marks because I actually called the variable directly. I can also print the variable and it will show Robert without any sort of quotation marks here. It's important to remember though that this input function always returns a string. This is important when you're working with certain like numeric data, for example. So let's actually put in a number. We're going to put in 5. Let's enter a second number. We'll just put 10. Now, if I try to add 5 plus 10, it gives me 510. What actually happened here? Well, what happened was that because the input function always returns text, it actually said, well, I want to do 5 plus 10 as strings, because you can see here that value 1 is in fact 5. Well, what Python can do is it can actually add together strings, and it's called concatenation. So these Python strings got concatenated together. So how do we fix that? Let's see. What I can do is I can add a number like 10, or use the input for a number like 10. And what I can do is I can convert that number using the int method. Or the int function. So I'll put int here and then put the value and then save it back to the same value. And now you can see that the value is now 10. I can also do this all in one step. So what I can do here is I can get the input, and then what I'll do is I'll take the result of that input and then convert it to an int and then store that to the another value variable. So I'll take another value called 5, and now you can see that another value is 5. Now if I want to, I can say value plus another value, and that will give me 15, which is exactly what I wanted. But what if we try to convert a string to an int or a float? Will it work? Let's see. So we're going to enter something that's not actually an integer. So let's put in happy, or let's spell happy correctly. It says invalid literal for int with a base 10 happy. And the reason why, of course, is because you cannot convert the word happy to an integer. So you can see how you can get input from the user, and you can convert that input if you want a specific number. And then from there, you can actually see whether it is actually a number or not. Or if you wanted to, you could even convert it to a float. The way you would convert to a float is by using the float command, so for example, if I just do 1 here, it will convert it to a float. I can also do string here, and I can just do 1, and it will actually convert this, whatever this is, to a string. Now, this right here, let's explain what this is. This is called an exception here, this value error. And then here we have what's called the traceback, which is all of this. This is a really useful thing that you guys should get used to using when you're actually writing code. And the exception and the traceback gives you, most of the time, gives you all the information you need to figure out why your code has a problem. Now, it takes some time and experience to get used to how to actually use this, but it is worthwhile to spend some time doing it. The value error down here will actually give you, this is the actual error message here, invalid literal for int with the base 10. Because of course, integers are base 10 numbers. And of course, you can't convert happy to an int because happy is not a base 10 number. And then you can see here that it'll actually show you the line of the text that you had the problem in. So say, for example, I had multiple lines of code. It would show me the line of code in the cell that actually had the problem, excuse me. So now you know how to get input from the user, you know how to convert that input, and you know how to read and understand an exception and a traceback. Well, maybe you don't understand the last part completely, but at least you'll get there. In the next video, we're going to put it all together and we're going to actually accomplish a task.